Hello friends of Powerhouse Bakery. My name is Suzanne Parker and I'm the owner and founder of Powerhouse Bakery, and I'm so glad that all my favorite divas and dudes are out there ready for another session of What is Healthy. Today I want to show you some really good information about why we want to include fish in our diet. I'm not only going to show you some of the nutrition facts and what science has really proven to us over the years as to why we should have fish in a healthy diet. I'm also going to show you a wonderful way to cook a fish that maybe doesn't make it into your basket very often when you're shopping at H-E-B or Whole Foods. So let's get started. Look at this beautiful platter. What I've got here is a couple of fillets of cod. Cod is a beautiful white fish, and just like any fish, it needs to be part of our healthy eating pattern. And so what I'm going to show you today is a recipe that kind of dates back from my love of French cooking and using a special blend of butter and parsley and olive oil to make a wonderful sauce in the skillet. Right as we're cooking it, we don't have to make a separate sauce. We're just going to cook everything in our skillet. So the first thing we're going to do is serve these pieces of fish, and I'm going to cut them into about 5-ounce portions. And again, you don't have to have a specific recipe, but it really is nice to have the fish about the same sizes. Notice that this one's a lot thicker than this fillet, and that's just the nature of the creature. So we're going to plan accordingly when we put it into our skillet for cooking. And just like I always mention, it's really important to start with a nice hot skillet, so I'm preheating that as I'm going to take you through the rest of our ingredients. And it's quick because this recipe is super simple and there's not very many ingredients included. So let's get going. What I have here is some chopped parsley, and I have some chopped shallots. So many of you might not have seen shallots at H-E-B before. So I want you to see that they're a beautiful little, almost onion, almost garlic shape. And when we cut into them, you'll see that there isn't really anything like it. When you cut into it in half, it looks very much like an onion. But sometimes when you cut into a shallot, there are extra lobes in it. So in this example, you can see how there are two that are really pulled together, very much like an onion. But in other cases, pieces will come off like a garlic clove. So just know that this beautiful vegetable is full of flavor. It's typically more mild than an onion, but sometimes it can have a lot of peppery zing to it. But it's something that's used quite a bit in French cooking. And so again, just like any onion, we're going to want to slice it, maybe even mince it. So again, depending on your recipe, you can leave the shallot in large pieces or in small. But what's nice about this dish is we are going to start the saute with the shallot. We want it to get a little softer than the parsley that we're going to put in next. So even if you do maybe a little more of a rough chop, that's okay, because it's still going to have a chance to cook in our skillet. So let me get started with this. You hear that? We got our beautiful sizzle. All the producers, when we do TV, love to hear the sizzle. So there we have it. I have my skillet on medium. So now I'm going to bring it up just a little bit. So now I'm at medium high. And I'm going to add a little bit more in that I've already chopped earlier. So again, this recipe is really simple. We have the shallots, and we are going to cook with a little bit of butter, and we're going to cook with a little bit of olive oil. So I'm going to start with the olive oil, and it's about 2 tablespoons, because again, this is going to be a fantastic sauce. Again, fish is such an important component of a healthy diet. You've probably heard that omega-3s are valuable as far as our health is concerned, and that's absolutely true. Another item that's really important with fish, of course, it's a great source of protein. It's even a great source of lean protein, which is important to our overall intake of fats. We know we want to decrease the amount of fats that we take in, and we want the fats to be less saturated and more polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. So fish is a great example of that. You might have heard long ago when moms told their kids they had to take cod liver oil. Well, that's because of those omegas that were rich in that actual fish, the cod, which is what we're cooking today. So look how beautiful these shallots are coming together. That is so nice. They're just starting to get lucid in color, which is what we want. So my recipe for this dish has you cook it for about 3 minutes, just the onions first, and then you go ahead and add in the parsley and you add in your fish. So the other things we're going to do, we're going to use plenty of lemon juice, and you could also zest. I love to zest. Anytime I'm going to use juice, I always say make sure you use the zest as well. So I'm going to squeeze the lemon juice into this little bowl because this is going to be part of my all-important sauce. So as those onions are cooking down, they're looking gorgeous. I'm getting all the other ingredients ready. So it's parsley, lemon juice, butter, and of course our shallots. Here goes the parsley. These guys are beautiful and ready to go. I'm turning the temp down just a little bit and I'm putting in my chopped parsley. Now, if we were doing sort of a Tex-Mex take on this cod, you could absolutely add in some cilantro, you could add in some spinach, always adding in extra flavors. You know me, I love to add layers of flavors. But this one really is intended to be kind of a soft Parisian profile in the flavors. So at the very end, we're going to add fresh ground salt and pepper. But these shallots and parsley are going to really be the mainstay of our dish. So look how pretty that's becoming. Absolutely perfect. Another minute or so, and I'm going to take out the parsley and shallots, put it in a little side dish, and then I'm going to cook the fish. So notice too that with my butter, this is about, probably 3 tablespoons. And so I'm going to add a little bit in so it can reduce. So now I've got the olive oil with the shallots and parsley, and this is going to be so fantastic. Now I'm going to add in a little bit of my lemon juice. I'm going to hold back those seeds because we don't want the seeds to go in. Yeah, that's beautiful. So I still have my temperature at a pretty good level. If it starts to get the onions, or actually in this case the scallions, too brown, then we can always turn it down more. But these little shallots are looking absolutely gorgeous. See how it gives it such nice color. Okay, I think those are ready. So now I'm going to drop them right into my little bowl on the side, and we are going to put in the cod fillets. So if you've never had cod before, what's really nice is it fillets beautifully. So rarely do you get a big piece of bone in your fillet. So that's something that we really hate to have to bite into a bone. Salmon is such a popular fish, and of course it is probably the highest in those omega-3 fats, which of course is great. But cod is also good too. And another reason why we really like to include fish in our diet is for the vitamin D and the iodine. So now we've got 2 other very important vitamin and minerals that we don't want to miss out on, especially for people that live even 50 miles inland from the sea. It's much harder for us to get enough iodine. And we know that most people are actually deficient of vitamin D, according to many research papers out there. So all that being said, we want to make sure that including fish in our diet allows us to get plenty of vitamin D, plenty of iodine, as well as those omega-3s. All right, the fish is looking so pretty. I've got it sizzling away. I'm going to bring my temperature up again. And when you're timing your fish, I usually use an egg timer because you want about 3 minutes. You want majority of the cooking to happen on your first side so that when you're flipping it over, we're going to deglaze in the middle of that cooking process so that we add liquid. That's what deglazes, and then you flip it over and hopefully you get some beautiful browning action in that nice hot skillet. So I'm going to add a little bit of our simple flavors. Always try to get a couple different pepper mills in your kitchen. This one I've added 3 different types of peppers, and it's a really good quality grinder so you can get lots of good flavor, because you don't want to just put on regular pepper that's been ground who knows how long ago. Really liberating the flavors right when you ground at your cooking is the best way to go. There we go. And now I'm going to add a little bit of fresh ground Himalayan sea salt. And remember, you can always add more salt at the end. So we always just are a little more conservative in the first stage of the cooking. But these are starting to look so pretty. And remember I mentioned we have one that's a little bit fatter than the other two. So I've got this one nestled in a little bit more of the oil. And I'm just going to be working with these first because we know they're probably going to come off the skillet first. They're looking just perfect. I'm going to have my plate ready. And I'm just watching. You can kind of tell when it starts to get a little bit brown. I don't want to disturb it until I'm really sure that we've got some good color going on because that's going to make it a beautiful presentation. We always know that the eyes eat first, and having a beautiful fresh fish that has a light crispiness on one side is really going to make it such a wow experience when you serve it to your family. It's looking just fine. Now I'm going to be starting to add the other ingredients. Remember, I started my sauce with those first, the shallots and the parsley, and now I'm going to keep working it with the rest of the goodies that are in this skillet. And then at the very end, I'm going to put all of the sauce ingredients back into the skillet so we get all of the good flavors to meld together. Yeah, it's looking perfect. Let's go ahead and add in the rest of our butter. So whenever we are using butter, I do like to recommend you go ahead and spend a little extra and get organic. This is one spot where it's probably worth a little extra money because we know that all of those essential fats, the omega-3s that are in the dairy, are going to be concentrated in the fat. And so it's worth using the really good quality fat when you're using real butter. And of course, olive oil is always going to be a great one. It's a very strong source of the polyunsaturates as well as the monounsaturates, and that's definitely part of a healthy diet. So this recipe is going to call for at least 2 lemons. So I'm getting rid of the seeds as much as I can, and I'm dropping in all the lemon juice right around the edges of the fish. Oh yeah, that's looking gorgeous. I do want the sauce to reduce a little bit. That's why I have a pretty high heat. Look at that, I got a couple of seeds, that's okay. Get those guys out of there. And we're just at about the 3-minute mark, so I'm going to see if I can turn over those smaller fillets. Here we go. Oh yeah, it's looking beautiful. Sometimes I need a little help just to flip it over. Oh yeah, look at that. It's got some beautiful brown edges. That's just what we love. Yeah, that's perfect. Love it, love it. I'm going to give this one another 30 seconds. And all the while, the sauce is reducing all around here. Now you can use a cast iron skillet or you can use a non-stick. Really, anytime any skillet works. The trick is to get the skillet nice and hot. And make sure you have mise en place, so all of your ingredients ready to go just like I did today, and put them in with lots of control. So when you have a hot skillet, things will not stick. When you let everything warm up gradually in the skillet, things will stick. So that's what we try to avoid. All right, I think this little baby's ready to flip as well. Oh yeah. And see, this is almost finished. You can tell whenever the fish starts to flake like that, it's getting done. Oftentimes, I really think people get a bad impression with fish and say they don't like it if they've had an experience where the fish has been overcooked or it's just been not fresh fish. So I just bought this yesterday from H-E-B. It was on ice the entire time, and I think that's what makes a really wonderful fish. Super fresh, cook it right away, and don't overcook it. So now look at this. Ooh. I'm going to put the rest of the sauce right on top, because we want all those wonderful flavors to really soak in to this very delicate white fish. And although cod is not as high in omegas, it definitely has it. Remember that cod liver oil or the cod oil that moms from days gone by would have their families consume because they knew it would help them be so healthy. The vitamin D, as well as the iodine, as well as just a great protein source that's low in fat, is absolutely what makes fish such an important part of a healthy diet. I think our fish is ready to come out of the pan. I'm going to turn down my heat just a little bit. I'm going to take the smallest one off first. Ooh, there we go. Oh, it's just flaking so beautifully. Oh, we love it. If you had a wonderful piece of sourdough bread or some gluten-free bread, it would be so wonderful to sop up all this wonderful sauce. Yeah, that is so pretty. And don't worry if it kind of flakes apart. That just means it's so fresh and good. If only you could smell the amazing smells. And now I'm going to bring all those good little bits right onto my plate. This dish is served beautifully over jasmine rice or even some roasted potatoes, or even for that matter, some buttered potatoes would be a fabulous option here. All right, so there we have it. Some beautiful, there's a nice little filet right there. That big one really held up so nicely. And if we wanted to do a little garnish on the side, a little wedge or maybe even a slice of lemon is absolutely gorgeous. And again, don't be afraid of adding the complex carbohydrates to a meal like this. Like I mentioned, jasmine rice is absolutely fabulous. And when you're eating fish, it really makes sense to have a light carbohydrate to the side. So whether it be fish or potato, make sure you add in a great complex carbohydrate. And you know, when we think about a balanced meal, we do want to make sure that we have our veggies as a carbohydrate source. So whether we choose to have the veggies and the starch, either way, we definitely want to include a nice balance. And you know, when I mentioned the value of having the fish in a healthy diet, we know that the protein source is key. But we also, just in summary, remember that when we have a meal that is high in protein and low in fat, it allows us to cook with a little bit more pizzazz. And so that's really how the French culture has had a lot of fun with this, because they use fish a lot in their regular routine, and they are able to use some butter and some oils. So this dish looks absolutely gorgeous. And again, if we were to serve it with some rice or potato, I'd put it right around the sides, and it makes it so nice. And so I want you to feel good about using a dish on occasion that's going to have some butter and oil in it, because it's absolutely so pretty. So in summary, fish is in. It's in a healthy diet, and remember that vitamin D is a reason why we want to include fish, especially cod. We also know that iodine is a mineral that oftentimes people don't get enough of, and especially if you're living inland, even 50 miles away, our soils absolutely change. And so having less iodine in the soil means that you have less iodine in the potatoes and in the different crops that you're growing. So we want to make sure we have that. And then, of course, those omegas. The omega-3s are ones that we know really well from our love of salmon, but don't forget the white fish, because it absolutely has some of those too. And we know that when people eat a diet that is higher in fish, we absolutely see some epidemiological data that convinces us that it definitely makes a difference. When I did my research for today's class, I really looked at some of the research that's out there and really what makes the diet having fish so valuable. And when we look at large studies, and so I looked at one that was 40,000 big study of just men, and we even looked at another one of a small study of 93 men and women. And what we find is when this group, large group or even a small subpopulation, the more fish in the diet means lower risk of disease. So what diseases are we really talking about here? You know, it might surprise you. When we think about omega-3s, we know cardiovascular disease is one of those that's a big deal. And that's absolutely true. But as I did a little more research, because of the importance of that steroid or hormone-like vitamin, which is vitamin D, it ends up really having even more implications on other diseases. So of course we know that people that eat more fish have a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. We also know that depression, there's a lower incidence of depression in population studies that look at groups that eat more fish. So if you have at least one fish meal in the week, we see an improvement. So a lower risk of not only cardiovascular disease, but risk of depression. The other thing that I thought was so interesting is we also see that brain function is improved. So if we think of the building blocks that the body needs, we know our bodies need protein, we know our bodies need those omegas or those healthy fats, so the essential fatty acids. and of course, all those really important vitamins. We mentioned iodine, but let's say for sure, vitamin D is a powerhouse vitamin. We need it for so many things. We want to make sure that our diet is rich in vitamin D, and when you include a beautiful meal that has some omegas from the organic butter, some omegas from the fish, and then lots of fresh veggies as the accompaniment to the meal, we know we're getting this value. And it wasn't long ago that I talked about the value of mushrooms. So interestingly, you can certainly find vitamin D in the produce section, which is why I love to emphasize putting those greens and even some other sauteed veggies like the mushrooms along with your fish. So we know that it helps with brain function. We know it helps with minimizing risk of depression and, of course, the cardiovascular disease. And it all stems to the need of our body to have those critical building blocks. So many research studies are out there now talking about whether or not Americans or people in general are low in vitamin D. And it's truly hard to get a definitive answer, but I think the best rule of thumb is knowing that we can easily add vitamin D. Number one, we want to get out in the sunshine. We want to spend some time getting that sunlight that helps to change that chemical reaction in our skin so that the vitamin D is active in our bodies. We also know that getting a well-rounded diet is so important. And what better way than to start experimenting with different kinds of fish recipes. So of course salmon is a great one, and I still want you to include that. Cod is a great other option. It's a very delicate white fish. You notice here that when I cooked it, it was fast and easy. It flakes and it's absolutely gorgeous. And these big chunks are easy to fold into a breakfast taco for a breakfast meal, or of course a lunch or a dinner. But I really encourage you to think outside the box and saute some of those greens and mushrooms to get all of the vitamins that you can, and then start adding in those omegas with cod fish. It's a great option. Every time you can, think of fish as being a couple of options. You can saute like I did today. You can also pan fry, which is kind of what I did. Pan fry would be with just the oil and not the butter. The saute is going to use that organic butter. And a small amount goes a long way. If you want to stay dairy-free, you could experiment with ghee, and that would still give you the great ability to saute. Of course, you can still bake. So baking them in the oven is an easy way to do cod as well, but honestly, it won't be as pretty. And so if you decide to bake in the oven, make sure you put some slices of onion and beautiful peppers on top of the fish, fold it into some parchment, and still put a little bit of olive oil and those beautiful shallots in the oven if you're going to bake. But a little bit of pan fry or saute is a great way to go. So adding fish into your diet at least once a week, maybe even 2 or 3, is not so hard to do. A tuna salad one day a week, cod for dinner, and then of course your salmon, and then surprise your family and have it rolled up into a breakfast taco. I promise you it's an exciting variation that gives you a great source of protein, not to mention your iodine and your vitamin D. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I can't wait to see how you guys have made some special pan-fried cod at home, and send me some pictures, okay? Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys soon.